Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. It's been a while, but it's time for a Path of Exile 2 video. So there's been quite a lot of uproar in the community in regards to the new league that we got, which is like some wisps follow around and juice monsters and generally still not really drop any loot. Now, overall, I have been playing quite a lot. I'm recording this video at the tail end of my second stream, so I'm about, I don't know, 18 to 20 hours in. I have been playing Minions, which is the worst build to be playing right now, and I have made it to maps. I've done a handful, maybe a little bit more than a handful of maps, so at this point I have a pretty good idea about the different stages in the game. Now, throughout these 2 days, they have nerfed and reverted the nerf and then re-implemented the nerf to like monster HP, so, if you got into the league a little bit late, you may have had a bit of a different experience, because, it's been a bit of a messy implementation. I think they intended to nerf the monster HP, but the patch had like lots of issues. And then they took it back, and then I think on the second day we actually got the patch, and they basically reduced the monster HP throughout the campaign for the most part. Now, all of that, it's been a bit of a mess because early on, as many of you guys know that are watching this video, you had to make a new character if you want to play in the new league. It's generally how Path of Exile 1 is played, and it's generally the model that has made it the game that it is today. You make a new character, you start from scratch, and overall you'll notice that the game is not exactly like hard. It's just like kind of a slog. Like everything just has way too much HP. Around Act 2 is about the time that it was at its worst, and I tried to kind of see about how much it would take. It took about 12 to 15 auto attacks from a single minion to kill one white monster in Act 2. And I think it's important to know that I generally know how to play these type of games and set up these type of characters. Although there were a lot of changes, by the time I was in Act 2, I kind of knew what was going on. So yes, white mobs were exhaustively hard. I did have a lot of slow boss kills in Act 1. The slowest boss kill was about a 12-minute kill on the Act 2 boss. But again, I didn't die. I actually had my first death in Act 3 to the Colossus because he one-shotted me in a spot where I thought he couldn't hit me just like randomly. Hey, you're dead. And by the way, that fight also took like 10 minutes. Now, they said that they, walked back a lot of the monster HP, so probably if you're playing now, it won't be quite as bad. I also checked out a bunch of other streamers, and generally speaking, it looks like minions have been hit the hardest with nerfs, and warriors have been hit the least with nerfs. Now, you might be saying that your warrior and your hammer user feels really terrible, and it feels much worse than last patch. That's true, yes, but we're talking about pretty objective measures. If you look at the ladders, like in the hardcore ladder, like 10 of the top 10 is playing warrior. So, it's not really much to argue here. Early on, it seems like they are the fastest, they are the best. Yes, everyone is feeling the nerfs, but it looks like Hammer, Warrior, and a few like Ballista builds and a few of the bug tornado interactions that are now fixed were some of the other outliers. Now, overall, the game state is just kind of in bad balance mixed with just really slow. I'm talking about like pretty big differences in balance. Like while it took a minion about 15 hits to kill a white monster, and certainly some time, and all my minions are getting pretty much one-shotted by anything at that point in the game, even though I've invested about 100% minion life on the passive tree. Warriors, I saw Karn, even during the campaign, he would just one-shot most of the screen using his movement skill. So massive differences in power, and we'll kind of have to see where that ends up. But everyone was feeling the slog, everyone was feeling the slow gameplay, with a lot of the really OP stuff nerfed, with a total reset if you're playing in the new league. It's slow. It really is. Now, before I get into other parts of the video, I think it's important to kind of talk about what Path of Exile 2 is supposed to be as a game. They kind of implemented a lot of Soul-like elements with active block, now with active parry, with the dodge roll, with just boss mechanics that you can typically avoid if you're, quick and good enough. Investing in a character to have to like hard tank certain aspects. It's not like POE1 in that sense. POE1 also has scaling of speed. POE2 doesn't really have that, even if you get a whole bunch of like attack speed, and it really isn't movement speed, by the way. A lot of abilities are kind of locked behind like a +1 second timer. The attack speed does not apply to that 1 second, so you just can't get that much faster even if you heavily invest in it. It's just that kind of game. But what kind of game is it really trying to be? It's kind of difficult, right, to say that it is like a Soul-like game, because as I've seen many people on Reddit point out, a game like Dark Souls, which is what people call like a Soul-like games, people who are really good at that game can beat the entire game in like an hour and some change without even getting hit, and they're just two-tapping most of the monsters along the way. No, it kind of is that PoE is more of a sluggish game than that. Even the best players are typically not doing that. Nobody is doing the campaign in an hour and some change. It's just impossible. And I feel that it's not necessarily right to criticize the kind of game that POE2 is supposed to be. I think they're still kind of figuring that out, truly. But I do feel like the thing that they're kind of gravitating towards is not really compatible with playing a new character every 3 to 4 months. I think there is a bit of an issue there where the slow, methodical combat of killing white monsters in a dozen hits on your way through the acts, I think that kind of works, but not so much if you expect people to make a new character from scratch doing that every 3 or 4 months. And the League model, the reset model, has really worked out in Path of Exile 1 so well. It's why the player base has been built up over the years. I don't know if they're really willing to drop that. So I think there is going to be a bit of tension between these two things, where they're trying to make a slow, methodical game, but they want you to constantly make new characters every few months. I just don't think those are on the same track right now. And where that's going to end up, I don't know. I do imagine they're going to try to wiggle through and see where it ends up in a place that they like, probably. It is difficult to say because they made a game that's much slower, and then in the first 2 days immediately nerfed the health of monsters. Ultimately, that was the right thing to do because it was just kind of boring. It took a really long time to get through the acts, and again, I know what I'm doing as a player. And again, I want to emphasize this. It's not a matter of difficulty. I was not dying, okay? It's like it just took 3 to 5 times longer to do the same stuff as it did a few months ago. If you multiply monster health by 10, yes, it's going to be a little bit harder, but it's not going to be 10 times harder. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, in terms of balance, different skills, different builds got hit in different ways from the giant nerfs that we learned about, by the way, like a day before it came. I know they had patch notes, but their patch notes were largely incomplete. We really had to kind of dive through the new gems and the data mine info, and for most people that was hours before the League actually released. There was very limited ability to plan out what you were going to do this League. And yeah, it was just wild that it was so last minute. In terms of minions, now that I have played it throughout the entire campaign, I've taken a look at all the minions. Just a quick report. I know some of you guys don't care about minions, but I think it's important to kind of have you guys understand that the balance here is a mess. So people told me that their Infernalists that were using the Arsonists, the one that throw the bombs, their tooltip was down 90% from the patch. Now, I can't personally confirm this, but I have heard of figures that they were down about 70% of their damage, to the more extreme case of losing 90% of their damage. But on top of that, you're able to summon fewer of them because there's loss of spirit from a multitude of different ways. Now, I might be able to recoup that with different gearing and stuff. I don't know. But yes, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about up to 90% nerf in damage, meaning that you'd have to multiply your current damage in the game right now by 10 to be about as strong as you were in the previous patch. I've also been told that people with like some of the craziest Infernalist minion setups in the game are now barely able to clear tier 15 maps. Again, I'm sure there's some wiggle room in optimization that could be done given that the game has changed quite a bit. And honestly, Arsonist may not be the best minion. The minions are all pretty closely tied together in terms of balance and usefulness. There's merit to each one, which I think is pretty cool, except for Reavers. And I just want to give you guys a scale of where the damage lies. So on a level 18 gem with only a few minion passives, not that many, like 50 minion damage, the Reaver max hit, again on a level 18 gem, was 45. Like, it's the lowest damage minion. The next lowest does like 80, by the way. It's like the Arsonist. 45, and it's pure physical. So that means that, yeah, you're going to scale that up, but not that many times over. It's POE2. The multipliers are pretty reasonable. You're going to scale that up to a point where it's maybe like a few hundred. The thing is, while monsters still have armor, now have a little bit less armor, they still have several thousand armor. Like that 45 damage baseline from a Reaver, it's going to be 4. Because monsters with any amount of armor are going to reduce it by 90%. So Reavers are just completely bricked. They're just absolutely unusable. So just really weird things with balance that I've seen. And we have pretty big news this patch was that Spectres are coming. Now, I didn't know this initially, but Spectres, they have different costs based on each Spectre. There's about 500 monsters in the game, so it's kind of, wow, they actually added Spectres for 500 monsters. Well, I learned that this is not exactly true. They did not go and hand select the different spirit costs for each Spectre. They basically used some kind of formula that factored in how much experience a monster would grant if you killed it and how much loot, and basically equated some kind of cost based on that formula. And generally speaking, they probably took that cost and doubled it because I have so far found one Spectre that it's worth its spirit versus the skeletons. And because it's just one of several hundred that people have tried, almost certainly this Spectre would be nerfed instead of the other 490 coming up to its power level. Now, it's really wonderful because even having one usable Spectre, it's kind of like having an entirely new minion skill, which is amazing, which is why people were so hyped about the Spectre skill. But again, I want to give you guys, if you halved the cost of the other, 30 Spectres that I tried, and I tried really some of the best ones because I was looking up their stats, if you cut their cost in half, they're still a little bit overcost for the most part. So I just don't understand it. For such an important and meaningful skill, for such a cool ability that would get people and really thinking about their characters, and content creators would go crazy making content about all the usable Spectres and combos. It's like it wasn't even close to that. Why not just spend 1 day? If I had to do it, it would take me 1 day to kind of review each of the Spectres, maybe try them for a few minutes, and then assign a fairly appropriate spirit cost. Why didn't that happen? I don't know. The fact that the patch notes were so late, it just it feels like this whole patch is just really last minute, all of it. So many things seem like they kind of, got through the cracks, and so many things felt like they should have gotten a lot more attention than they obviously did. I also want to point out a few experiences that I had on my journey with my character. So the first map that I did, it's not like a quantity system in the maps. It was a 60 rarity map. Basically, my very first map, Waystone or whatever, it was a 6 mod rare Waystone. Okay, I put it in. I'm like, let's get some loot. Okay, it was Seepage, which is a massive map. It is huge. There's just hundreds of monsters in there, right? So 60 rarity. I also have a rarity on my character on its gear. And I got even the wisps. I got some of the wisp monsters down. The entire map dropped no rare items. Now, it was a little bit of an anomaly. I've done other maps, and I did get some rare items in those. But I just want you guys to understand here. I killed hundreds of monsters with 60 rarity on top of like the 20 rarity my character had. And most importantly, I did a strong box that was also rare, that had like 8 extra packs. And the strong box, that it dropped no items. Okay? It dropped 0 items, which is insane. I've also had some strong boxes in the campaign. I had a rare one that had both quantity and rarity, and it dropped a single white item. I also had a strong box that said it would drop a unique item, and you know what it dropped? 1 chance shard. It did not drop a unique item, even though it said that it would. So, like, you know, it's like really bizarre stuff. It feels like this stuff barely passed like a once over in QA and launched. That's basically where I'm at. And for a game as anticipated and so long in the works as Path of Exile 2, that just doesn't seem right to me, right? It feels like if they really needed like an extra couple of weeks to make this patch happen, they probably should have just taken an extra couple of weeks. Or I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but yeah. On top of all of that, I am having a reasonable amount of fun just checking out the game again. But I also want to point out that it's not like way different. A lot of the time in Path of Exile 1, when you'd have a new league, you'd also have like a new league mechanic that would be very significant and change your gameplay to a point where it just feels fresh and you have real new challenges to look forward to. The whole Wisp stuff is basically junk. They basically have way too much health, and it's the tormented spirits of POE1. Nothing really interesting at all, in my opinion. Also, while I am pretty early in the mapping system, the maps, it's just, again, the maps are huge. Man, I feel like the maps are bigger than before. You know, we'll probably see if this is true a few weeks from now when people get too bored of actually playing the game. But man, the few maps that I've done feel colossal. The gameplay loop isn't really that different than last season, which is something that you're actually looking for when you play a new league, at least in Path of Exile 1. And yeah, there's just so many like issues that I'm sure they'll address at one point. But man, you know, the last big launch of POE2 was like, was that 3-4 months ago? It's been a while. I was just kind of hoping for a little bit better. That's where I'm at. I'll still be playing. If you're curious, we do have the new Minion army build. If you want to see what I'm playing, this is it. I have fully updated the guide on Mobalytics, so I'll leave a link for you guys that in the description below. A video will be coming for the build guide, but I do want to do a little bit more mapping and try a few more things, as people are really exhaustively trying some of the Spectres right now. And yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. But for now, that's where we're at. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.